it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dave Rossman, who is a regular attendee here at Muleskinners, so we all know him pretty well. But I was interested in some of the things in his bio that I did not know. He's an award-winning author, columnist, and educator, and you can read his weekly essays in the Columbia Missourian, of course, and on inkinvoice.com editorials, and he also is a book reviewer for the New York Journal of Books. He's originally from New York City, lived in Denver for over 25 years, and has been here since 2003. He's faculty of communication at Columbia College and chief cook and bottle washer of Ink and Voice Communication. He provides communication consulting and editing services for businesses, political campaigns, and not-for-profits. He's the winner of the Interactive Media Council's Award for Excellence in the category of Political Website Design, Writing, and Editing, and has been twice nominated for the Colt-Wright Award for Professional Development and Academic Textbook Writing. His most recent book is A Christian Nation, an examination of Christian nation theories and proofs, and it's available through Amazon.com in paperback or e-book formats. And he's here today to talk to us about religion, politics, and elections.
And the book is for sale on back table, and please buy one or two or three. I'm giving this group the retail price on it is $20. I'm selling it to you guys for $17.50, including the tax. So, and I take MasterCharge, Visa, American Express, and Discover. This is an honor. Most of you know me. Most of you have read my articles. Most of you know my name or have called me by multiple names, some of which I can't repeat here. But I need to start this by making an additional statement. I am an atheist. I am proud of that, and I have said that since, well, before I moved here to Columbia. But this is not an anti-religion or an anti-Christian presentation, as my book is not anti-religion or anti-Christian. What I want to talk about here is really the question of religion and politics and elections, and certainly timely because of our current elections. A couple of years ago in the school board election here, one of our candidates put on her brochure that she wanted to bring Christian values to the Columbia Public Schools. And though I didn't work on her campaign, I met with her way before, just after she announced, and I advised her, as well as other people, don't put that on the brochure. She did, and now we're getting into new questions as to religion and politics and the election. I want to start this, and I just turned 60, so I need my glasses now. I want to start this with a quote, and most of you have heard this before in parts, but in 1960, then Senator John Kennedy had to justify his being a Catholic, and that he did not or would not take orders from the Pope as he was President of the United States. And he did this for the Houston Ministerial Association. I want to open this with one of his quotes, and the quote goes, "I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preferences, and where no man is denied the public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him, or the people who might elect him." And I think this is a very important point because, well, in U.S. history, starting at about 1620, religion and politics has always been part of our nature. So the other side of that story comes from a friend of mine. His name is Stephen Carter. Stephen is a very, very good writer. He is a professor of law he is also a Christian, and he is very, very proud of his Christianity. But let me give you the other side of that argument from him as soon as I get to the right page here and put the eyeballs back on. It's a bear getting old. Thank you. I should make my biases clear. I write not only as a Christian, but as one who is far more devoted to the survival of my faith and the religion in general, to the survival of any state in particular, including the United States. He goes on and says, I love this nation with all its weaknesses and occasional horrors, and I cannot imagine living in another one, but my mind is not clouded with the vapors of patriotism, that I place my country before my God. The unfortunate part with elections, especially here in the United States, but we've seen this overseas too, with elections when they started to become public elections in Europe, that religion is becoming a stronger and stronger factor, or we believe it is. One of the reasons we believe it is because of the internet and 24/7 news channels. I don't know about you, but CNN is permanently on one of my television sets. Little TV in the office, and CNN is up there just blasting away. So I want to talk and start about our early founding. And I know you guys are much smarter than I am, so if I make a mistake, please tell me. But if you do the research and you start looking at Christian nation as it's found in written text in English and in Spanish, and English, Spanish, and Latin, and I'll explain why the Spanish is important in a moment, you did not see those two words collaborated until about 1640. That is 20 years after the founding of Plymouth. And I'll talk about that. It went straight up, came straight down, and by the 1680s, you didn't see it any longer. It didn't come back until the mid 1730s. And at that point, there was a new faith-based movement in the colonies. The colonies were mostly Anglican. Why? Because we were British. And they discriminated against Catholics, Baptists, Jews. One of the religions that I never saw in there, however, were Muslims. Now, you're thinking now, 1730, Muslims, United States, now. Well, when Christopher Columbus came over in 1492, the first mate on the Nina and the captains of the Pinta and the Santa Maria were Muslims. There was a mosque in Boston in 1710. It didn't last very long. The community got kind of moved around a little bit. The only two states that had tolerance for religion were Rhode Island, which, by the way, has the oldest Jewish temple in the United States, which started in the 1690s and is still active, and Pennsylvania. Because William Penn said that even though the state is being founded by Quakers, Quakers do tolerate and accept all other beliefs. And if any of you are Quakers or know Quakers or have gone to Quaker meetings and discussions, this is perfectly understandable. This is perfectly understandable. Why the Spanish? Well, the Spanish were here before the English, but they were on the other side of the continent, and we kind of forget about that. But the main purpose of the Spanish being in the New World was military, gold, and trade. The monks and the priests only came along to keep the conquistadors in line. It was not their primary purpose to convert the natives into their beliefs and religions. So when I was doing my research for my book and for this speech and a subsequent book that's going to be coming out in a couple of years, I hope, was to find out why people believe that this is a Christian nation and why people truly believe that Christianity is the basis of not just the nation, but our Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and if you take it one step further, you must include the Articles of Confederation of States, of the United States. Well, let me give you a hint of some of the things that I discovered. William Bradford came over in the Mayflower with about 43, 47 families. But on this long trip across the Atlantic, Bradford was getting very nervous because he said that the people, this is becoming a very rowdy group. There's no organization here. So he wrote out a very succinct document in the language of the time by a Puritan minister. But it's short. It's very distinct. It has wonderful, it's a beautifully written piece. It was signed by all the males that was on the boat that he was on. So it was a true compact. But in the middle of this wonderfully flowery piece of writing, it says, the government shall be purported by the citizens of the colony. So even though there's a lot of religious language in there, even Bradford saw initially that his new colony of Salem, and then eventually Boston, would be a secular nation. Now, it didn't last very long, and I'll explain that in a second. Roger Winthrop came 10 years later, in 1630, and we kind of get those two guys confused and mixed up. What my Christian Nation advocate friends say is that, well, he wrote this beautiful, beautiful piece. It's called The Model of a Christian Charity. And I said, yes, he did. But it was never signed by any of the members or any of the people on the boats. Oh, and by the way, there was a second Mayflower in that group. So there are multiple Mayflowers out there, so choose. And it was a sermon. It was not a document meant for the governing of their new colony, Plymouth. So we have these two documents that are really out there, and everybody points that Massachusetts Bay, they were Christian. Well, yeah, they were. They were getting away from the other Christians that were discriminating against them. But yeah, they were Christian. What people don't realize is that there was a fourth settlement in Massachusetts. It's called Maury, M-A-R-E. Maury was settled by a gentleman named Thomas Morton. Morton started a British pagan settlement in 1624, before Winthrop. The problem with this settlement was not the settlement, it wasn't the people, it was Bradford, who didn't really like the idea from the start. In 1628, the township, the village of Maury, decided to have a May Day celebration. Cool. Maypole, people dancing, which is very anti-Puritan. So that was going to get Bradford's gall up anyway. But they did two other things. They invited the local Algonquin Indians to celebrate May Day with them. Oh my gosh, the heathens are taking in the heathens. Oh, by the way, Algonquins, while you're here, why don't we allow your women to marry some of our men? Well, that's the ultimate in sins as far as Bradford was concerned. He got a band of about 50 people together with their guns and their pitchforks and their swords, and they marched up to Maury, and without firing a shot, because Morton was a pacifist, they took over the village. Morton turns around and tells his people, you know, up there, let's go back to England and harass the Queen. And they did. And just as a side note, the British pagan community is still quite large. And there are a lot of people out there, you know, really believing in this stuff very well. There are 3 documents that the people look at to say we are a Christian nation because they are bound by the 10 Commandments, which my first question always is, which 10 Commandments? There are either 6, 10, 12, 15, or 635, depending on how you're counting things. I usually, if it's a Christian, I go back to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which only gives 6 different commands. But one of those commands is to honor all the original commands. And that means that Christians should be having their services on Saturday, not Sunday. So they're following the rules that were sent out by the Roman Emperor Constantine, who didn't like Jews, and said, we'll have nothing Jewish left in our laws because I am now a Christian and I was appointed by God. Therefore, I get to make the rules. Oh, and I have the army. So they look at the Declaration of Independence, I look at the Articles of Confederation, and they look at the Constitution. Of those 3 documents, only the Articles and the Constitution are law. The Declaration was just a letter saying, hey, we don't want to be with Britain anymore, we're leaving, bye. And if you read it, it's a letter of complaint. Here are all our complaints you never answered to. We're leaving, see ya. So, but in those 3 documents, Lord is mentioned 3 times. Twice as the year of our Lord. God is mentioned twice. No, once, I'm sorry. God is mentioned once, and that's in the Declaration. But it is the laws of nature and nature's God, and understanding that the writer of the Declaration, Jefferson, was a deist. He didn't quite believe that Christ was the Savior of all men. Now, there's a lot of chatter about that, and there are statements going back and forth. I don't want to get into that. But basically, yeah, he and Franklin were both deists. And when that document was signed, nobody made a statement concerning nature's God, because they all understood it. And a lot of the signers were Christian. They were devout Christians, very pious men, mostly Anglican. But they saw what the church and the state was doing in England, and they have wanted nothing of that here in their new government. The Constitution does not talk about religion specifically as to we are supposed to be a Christian nation or a Jewish nation or a religious nation. It mentions religion twice. Once in Article 6, Clause 3, where it says, and I need my glasses again because I do want to read this completely. Senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of several state legislators, so now we're talking about both the state and the federal governments, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation. Interesting, because they're saying you don't have to make a religious oath, you can make a personal affirmation. So religion is being kept out of our document. To support this Constitution, semicolon, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. That's a very, very specific rule. It's one that I'm finding when I was writing a piece on my blog site that has various interpretations. My interpretation, this is personal opinion, is that that rule doesn't just go to the states and to the federal government to say you must be an Anglican or you must not be a Muslim or you can't be an atheist to run for office. But that also says that candidates for office should not be using their religion as a qualifier. Now, I'm being told I'm wrong on that by 2 of the law professors here at MU, but law professor at Washington University agrees with me. So I'm trying to find where the answer really is on this. And this clause has never been brought up to the Supreme Court that I can find. So now we have this new problem saying, well, can they use their religion as a qualifier, as a candidate? Which is where we get to the second part of religion. The very first sentence in the very first amendment to the Constitution says that citizens of this country shall be allowed to believe as they want to believe. They have a freedom to their religion. And they are protected because the government cannot sponsor a religion. Well, that's well and good, but there's a flip side to that. If the government can't sponsor religion, then religion cannot sponsor government. And if I have the freedom to choose my religion, I also have the freedom not to choose my religion, or in my case, to be an atheist. On Easter Sunday, Meet the Press had a wonderful, wonderful piece on politics and religion, and of course, I wanted to watch it. Representative Cleaver from Kansas City was there, Kansas City area. He's also a minister. There was another representative who's a minister from his church, and there were two other people. The last person in the group was Billy Graham's daughter, Anne Graham Lotz. Now, I've read her stuff, I've listened to her sermon. She's actually a very good speaker. I love listening to her speak. She's just like her dad. But she voluntarily comes out in the middle of this conversation that she would not vote for an atheist because they do not have fear in God, therefore they are not moral. I don't know how that actually works, but I've never heard of the atheists having an inquisition. Anybody disagree with me on this? I'm sure. So, yeah, we have atheists who are anti-religion, which, by the way, I'm not. If you want to believe, believe. And I probably read your holy book somewhere along the line. But I'm not going to tell you not to believe. I'm going, if you ask me, I'll tell you why it may not be right. So I wrote a letter to Meet the Press. I have not received an answer back from it, saying that David Gregory, who's the host of the show, should have gotten on her case, and he didn't. Because if she doesn't want atheists because they don't have fear in her God, that would include Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, Shinto, and any other non-Christian religion. So should religion be used in American politics? The second part of the three parts of the First Amendment also says we have the right to free speech. Free speech in public. And I train my students in this by saying, if I was working over at MU, and because it's a public institution supported by our government and chartered by our government, that if I want to talk about religion in a speech class and why it's wrong, they can't stop me. But at Columbia College, which is a private institution, non-profit, if Dr. Bruder, the president of the campus, came up to me and said, David, you can't talk about religion or politics ever again. I can't talk about religion or politics. So there's this line between public and private. And when people understand that, then the rest of this becomes very clear. Why there's now an argument as to whether my affirmation that I am an atheist can be said during a political campaign. Or our school board member's affirmation that she wants to bring Christian values into the Columbia Public Schools is permissible, because this is a public document and I'm making a public speech. So the question now, and the courts don't even want to talk about this, is whether or not we can, as citizens, or we are permitted to, or we even should, use religion as a qualifier for an elected official. Now, I will admit a couple of things. Number one, yes, the United States is a Christian nation by virtue of the religion of our population only, not by virtue of our laws. So, that being said, and because of the numbers and the growing numbers of fundamentalists and evangelical and Pentecostal Christians who are very politically active, religion is going to become and stay a major part of our election process. But it didn't start in 2000 or 1976 with Jimmy Carter and being an evangelical Christian. It didn't start with Mr. Kennedy. It started in the election of 1798. Because in 1798, the Federalists and the state rights people were starting to make their major split, which is why we're a two-party nation as it is now. And some of the partisan newspapers, and there were just bunches of them, were coming out that the candidates for U.S. Senate and for U.S. House of Representatives, that they were either good Christians or they weren't. The election of 1800 is John Adams, either a Calvinist or a Unitarian, depending on whose book you're reading, and Jefferson, at that time, a true deist. The partisan newspapers used religion. The papers that were pro-Adams were saying that Jefferson is an atheist and therefore will make us a godless country, which are the same arguments I hear today. The Jefferson people were saying Adams is a fundamentalist Christian, which he really wasn't. Is a fundamentalist Christian, and he's going to make this a Christian nation. And we're going to be in the same problems as we were when we were under British rule. And it continued. There are some great, great books concerning that, the election of 1800. My favorite is called The Great Catastrophe. And it is just, it's so wonderfully written because he goes into very good detail, especially on the religious stuff. And I don't think he really meant to do it, but it's just part of the election. And religion has been in every federal, either the midterms or the national elections since. Sometimes to a great degree, as we're seeing it today. Sometimes not at all. There's still a question of what the religion was of Abraham Lincoln. He didn't go to church. We know George Washington was an Episcopalian, but he was kicked out of church. Why? He used to fall asleep. So he was a busy guy. So what he ended up doing is he'd take the carriage, drop Martha off, and just keep going. Go fight a war. Go be president. And then come back and pick her up. But religion has always been a part. So today, the Republican Party has taken religion in as part of its mantra. And the conservative Christian movement has gotten extremely strong. So strong that groups like Americans United for Separation of Church and State, which, by the way, is headed by the Reverend, I just forgot his name.
Barry Lynn.
Yeah, Barry Lynn. I was going to say Larry Bin, and I knew that was wrong. Barry Lynn. That's getting old. That he is increasing the number of complaints he is writing to the Federal Election Commission. And those complaints have increased over the last 4 years by almost 20% a year. Because ministers are coming out, and they may not be saying it directly. Now, as a nonprofit, remember, most churches are 501c3s, which is the same nonprofit as Central Missouri Community Action and all the other nonprofits we have here. They are not allowed to endorse a candidate, but they can endorse issues. And by endorsing an issue that's connected with a candidate, the question is, are they endorsing a candidate? is the Catholic Church, by screaming and yelling that Obama's trying to destroy religion, are they actually endorsing the Republican presumptive candidate? So we have all these new problems. As Democrats, we do not hold ourselves to the Christian movement or the Jewish movement or the gay lesbian movement or whatever movement's out there. Come on in, we're all right. We're like Unitarians. We like to talk. We never have a complete answer, but we know what we want. But the fact is that block voting happens. And the only way to move away from block voting is through education. And for those of you who read my article this week in the paper, you know my stance on education, public education. Public education needs to teach critical thinking, because once a person can think critically, they can ask those questions that need to be answered.
And they vote Democrat.
Okay, they vote Democrat. I didn't say that. Somebody in the back said it, and I thank him very much for pulling that out. So I want to close with another paragraph from Kennedy. And this is 2 paragraphs down from where he was. And this speech, if you get to watch it, it's on YouTube. I think I have a copy of it on my YouTube site. Maybe, I don't remember now. But if you watch it on YouTube and you watch the Q&A session after it, this man was very, very articulate, and he was very strong in his stance about the separation of church and state and religion and elections. He said, finally, I believe in an America where religious intolerance will someday end, where all men and all churches are treated as equals, where every man has the same right to attend or not attend the church of his choice, where there is no Catholic vote, no Protestant vote, no anti-Catholic vote, no Jewish vote, where Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, both the lay and the pastoral levels, will refrain from those attitudes of disdain and division which have so often marred their works in the past, and promote instead the American ideal of brotherhood. Is this a universal belief? No. Will it ever become one? Probably not. However, was it the founders' belief? I argue absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Scalia, and I will accept questions.
Just a quick one. You mentioned the Mayflower Compact and the culture and the language of it, but the significance of it typically is it's the first mention of the social contract, which anticipated Rousseau several years later.
Yeah, and it did.
About that part of the secular end of the
That is very much the secular end of it. And with the social contract that they made, they said that, and they took what Christ said, or supposedly said, that give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God. There is a separation in Christ's mind. So they were just echoing what they had read and what they believed. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just want to say agnostics and atheists are invited to the education.
Thank you very much. I have the moderator standing here, so I think
Well,
it's
we're
my
kind
turn.
of butting up against leaving time, but if others have questions, I think you're welcome to stay and ask them, but those who need to go, we understand.
And after we're finished, I'm going to sit down with my book there, and I'll sign it for you, so it looks like high class. And again, it's $17.50 with the tax included. Yeah.
Just comment that Rick Santorum got sick to his stomach when he read Kennedy's.
Yeah, and that hurts me as not as a Democrat, but as a human, because that type of language from Santorum saying that I was sick to my stomach when I read Kennedy's speech.
Vomit. He used the word vomit.
He vomited. Just
Made me want to vomit.
he probably did. But this is not the way a presidential candidate should act. This is not the way a vice presidential candidate should act if he's so nominated. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time. I appreciate being invited back.